What's up, YouTube? This is 82 and 0. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Steve Kerr. Now, this was requested from a supporter of mine. He asked me to do a video on Steve Kerr. So, Steve Kerr was born in Beirut, Lebanon, to Malcolm Kerr. And Malcolm was a Lebanese-American academic who specialized in Middle Eastern studies. And his wife, Anne, was originally from the U.S. Now, he has three siblings, two sisters, and a brother. His grandfather, Stanley Kerr, volunteered with the Near East River Relief during the Armenian Genocide and rescued women and orphans in Aleppo. Now, Kerr spent most of his childhood in Lebanon or surrounding Middle Eastern countries. Now, it was in Beirut in the summer of 1983 where he met U.S. Marines who were killed by a Beirut barracks attack. Kerr attended Cairo American College in Egypt, the American Community School in Beirut, Lebanon, and Paladis High School, now Paladis Charter High School in Los Angeles, graduated in 1983. Now, unfortunately, Malcolm Kerr, Steve's father, was killed by members of the Lebanese militant group called Islamic Jihad on the morning of January 18th, 1984. He was only 52 years old, and at the time he was serving as the American University of Beirut president. He was shot twice in the back of the head, the gunman using suppressed handguns in a hallway outside his office. Now, Steve Kerr was just 18 years old at the time, and he was a freshman in college. Now, regarding his father's death, he said, and I say, quote, "Before my father was killed, my life had meaning. And everything to me felt impenetrable. But then, that's when I woke up and realized bad things happened to other people." So, Steve Kerr channeled all this negativity, losing his father. He channeled it into the game of basketball. He went full basketball. But what I mean by that is, when I was doing research about him, his mother said in the Last Dance documentary that Kerr just put all of his energy into basketball. Now, he didn't get a lot of recruiting offers out of high school, but Kerr would end up playing basketball at the University of Arizona from 1983 to 1988. Now, in the summer of 1986, he was named to the U.S. national team that competed in the FIBA World Championship in Spain. Now, I want to note this was the last American men's senior squad to be composed strictly of amateur athletes. They didn't have any NBA players. Unfortunately, he blew out one of his knees in the tournament, forcing him to miss the Wildcats' entire 86-87 season. So, I want to talk about his collegiate career, because he was actually teammates with Sean Elliott, which Sean Elliott himself was a great shooter. And I think it's interesting because they were on the Spurs together later in their career. But during pregame warm-ups, Kerr was taunted by a Sun Devils fan with chants that included PLO. And he would also say, "Where's your father?" Imagine your father's killed, and people in the crowd are mocking your father's death. Man, this is the thing I always say. Fans take it too far. Like, remember a few years ago when Russell Westbrook was getting his kids were getting death threats. It's just a game. If you don't like the player, just boo his performance. People take it so personal. Although Kerr would lead the team to a victory, scoring 20 points in the first half, and he made all 6 3-point attempts. The Arizona State Athletic Director, Charles Harris, sent a letter of apology to him a few days later, along with fellow All-American teammate Sean Elliott. Now, I want to point out here, Kerr also set an NCAA single record for three-point percentage, shooting 57.3%. out of 114 out of 114 out of 199 shots in 87-88. Kerr graduated from the University of Arizona in 1988 with a bachelor's of general studies with emphasis on history, sociology, and English. Now Kerr, he's only 6'3", right? Small stature, NBA wise. There's not a lot of teams that were looking at him, especially when you think about in the 80s, there wasn't as much of an emphasis on shooting the three-pointer. That's just the fact, Teams used it as a last resort shot. It wasn't as highly emphasized. So there wasn't a lot of attention for Kerr. He averaged 11.2 points per game for his collegiate career, and he shot 54% from the field and 57% from three. Now, he was initially drafted by the Phoenix Suns in the second round. He was overall the 50th pick of the 1988 draft. So he started his career in Phoenix. And he would only play one season in Phoenix. Didn't get a lot of minutes, only played 28 games. But I do want to note, this Phoenix Suns team was stacked at the guards positions. This was the Phoenix team before Barkley. They went 55-27. They had guys like Kevin Johnson, Dan Marley, Jeff Hornacek. This was a good shooting team. Eddie Johnson. I would have loved to see this team on 2K. Tom Chambers. So it was a stacked team. Craig Hodges was on this team. So you see why Steve Kerr didn't get a lot of minutes. But he ended up getting traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And again, he's on a team that has, elite shooting. Now, his sophomore season would be his first year leading the league in three-point percentage. He shot 50%. Crazy numbers. Now in Cleveland, he played with Mark Price. Mark Price himself was one of the best three-point shooters of that era. He actually took quite a few attempts. But, they didn't win any championships in Cleveland. And Cleveland was supposed to be this up-and-coming team. The Bulls were not looked at, in some people's minds, in the late 80s as the up-and-coming team, even though they had Jordan. They thought, hey, the Cleveland Cavaliers, they're the team of the 90s. But we all know how that worked out. Jordan and the Bulls were the team of the 90s. His last season in Cleveland would be the 92-93 season, where he was traded mid-season, traded to the Orlando Magic. Now, he briefly played with Shaquille O'Neal on the Orlando Magic in 92-93, which I don't think a lot of people realize that. Now, in 93-94, he ended up getting traded again. He'd be on the Chicago Bulls. Now, this Bulls team, they weren't in a rebuild. I don't like to use that word, but Chicago had their first three-peat. And the thing about Chicago was they lost some of their players. Jordan retired the first time. Horace Grant, the second season that Jordan was gone, he would be gone in Orlando. But this Bulls team was really good at getting a lot of pieces. They got Tony Kukoc. They went out and got Luke Longley. Just good role players to accommodate their stars. Now, Steve Kerr was a great role player. He knew his role, and he played it to perfection. He's not an all-star, not a Hall of Famer, but I think he's a household name because of how good of a role player he was. So he would play the 93-94 season and 94-95 season. These were the seasons where Jordan was playing baseball, but 95-96 comes around. Jordan's back for a full season. And this, in my opinion, is the greatest NBA team of all time, the 96 Chicago Bulls. Okay, we can debate that another time. Some people say the 17 Warriors. Whatever, it's all opinion. This is my opinion. But Kerr was a perfect role player. Now, there was another guy on that team, Tony Kukoc, who played his role to a perfection. And also, they got Ron Harper, who was a 20-point per game scorer in Cleveland. But he played his role of being a defensive guard. So the 96 Bulls was a lot of pieces around Jordan and Pippen. They even got Rodman, who was previously on the Spurs, and earlier than that, the Pistons. So this team was different than that first three-peat, you know? And actually, you could make a case that Steve Kerr should have won Sixth Man of the Year in 1996. Yes, Tony Kukoc did, but despite that, Kerr was actually third in Sixth Man of the Year voting in 96. But it was in 96 that I think this was his peak, just like it was Jordan's peak, in my opinion. Kerr would average 50% three-point shooting, just coming off the bench, providing 8 points per game, and they would win their. He would win his first championship with the Bulls, and this would be the first championship of the Bulls' second three-peat. Now, the 96-97 Chicago Bulls. This is where I think Kerr is most known because they go all the way to the finals. And in 1997, they were faced against the Utah Jazz. And the Utah Jazz, this was one of the best offensive teams of that era. They were coached by a former Chicago Bull himself and Hall of Famer Jerry Sloan. And this team, you know, some people thought they could have won against the Bulls, but it goes to 6 games, just like almost all of the Chicago Bulls championships. Now, also I want to point out that Steve Kerr won the three-point contest in 1997. But I think everybody knows about Kerr's game winner in 1997. And to me, I really, really enjoy this game winner because a lot of times Jordan, he got that stereotype of, I got to take the last shot. It's all on me. And yes, he did take the last shot quite a bit. But Kerr was the one who stepped up. You know, time was winding out. And, you know, last second shot, Jordan passed it out to Kerr. Kerr hit that game winner. I think it was a 17-footer with 5 seconds left. And the United Center just went crazy. And the Jazz looked for a final shot to stay alive, but Scottie Pippen made a significant decent defensive play. He knocked away Byron Russell's inbound pass, intended to go to Shannon Anderson, and rolled the ball over to Tony Kukoc, who dunked for the final 2 points. So I'm going to post that right here. And I think that's what Kerr was most known for. Technically it wasn't the game winner, but you know what I mean. Took the lead with 5 seconds left. Some people think a game winner is just a buzzer beater. This is what sealed the deal for them. Now, they would win again in 1998. And we all know that was the Bulls' final championship. And he would go over to the San Antonio Spurs, which is my team. I think a lot of people who watch my show know I like the Spurs. And he'd win his 4th championship, 4 in a row. Now, he would sign with Portland for whatever reason. I wish he would have stayed with the Spurs, but it's whatever. Actually, he'd get traded now that I think about it. He got traded for Steve Smith. But then in 2003, the Portland Trailblazers traded him back to the Spurs. It's kind of confusing. I don't know if you guys are following me. Spurs traded him to Portland. Portland traded him to San Antonio. Now, 2003 would be his 5th championship. And, he didn't have much in the tank as far as contributing to this team other than coming off the bench, hitting some big shots. But one thing I really remember about this season was it was against Dallas in the conference finals. Game 6. Kerr had one of his best games. He went 4 for 4 from the three-point line to seal the deal. And, he'd go out with a ring, his 5th championship. But, one of my favorite aspects of Kerr was his commentary. He was a good commentator. He was a good broadcaster. He started in 2003 when he became an analyst for Turner Network Television, TNT. And he was alongside Marv Albert. And I remember, I think a lot of people my age remember this, when he was a commentator in the NBA Live games, like NBA Live 7, 2008, 2009. But he was also a voice commentator in 2K12 through, I think, 2K15. But Kerr left broadcasting in 2007 to become the general manager of the Phoenix Suns. But it was confirmed on June 28, 2010 that he would return to the NBA as an analyst for TNT starting in 2010-11 season. And that's when Kerr would do Open Court, which that's one of my favorite shows of all time. That's a show which just had former NBA players sitting around. Kerr was one of my favorite people on that. I would say he was a good executive in San Antonio, or why did I say San Antonio? Phoenix. But like I said, he would step down. But let's talk about his coaching career. On May 14, 2014, Kerr reached an agreement to become the head coach of the Golden State Warriors. And this was controversial for some people because a lot of people thought Mark Jackson was the one who built that team. And he doesn't get enough credit. But hold on. Kerr took those pieces that were there. But he ran with it. And I do think, as great of a player as Steph Curry is and as Klay Thompson is, I think Kerr was a lot of ways the mastermind behind this new three-point revolution. Because he himself was such a great shooter. It sounds weird to fans who've only been watching NBA for the past 5 years or so. Maybe 6, 7, whatever. But 20, 30 years ago, the volume of three-point shooting, even when Kerr played, it wasn't near what it is today. It was you would get benched a lot of the time for taking a lot of attempts. But Kerr gave the green light to Curry and Klay, and you would see Steph Curry would take a lot of high pick and rolls and coming off for that three. I'm not saying that Steph Curry is successful because of Steve Kerr. Obviously, Curry would be successful no matter what, but I'm saying Kerr has a big stake in this. Now, during the 2014-15 season, the team's offense imploded elements of the triangle offense, which is what he was taught in Chicago when he was coached under Phil Jackson. And he also implemented some of what he learned from Greg Popovich in San Antonio. And some of the up-tempo principles of Mike D'Antoni. So he took I'll take that back. He took 2 of the greatest coaches of all time, Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich, and a good coach of Mike D'Antoni, and implemented into the Warriors. And the Warriors hit hard. I'm sure we all remember in 2015 where they just came out of nowhere and won that championship. But, I remember the NBA season preview where they were saying, who they were predicting was going to win. And I remember talking to my brother at the time, and I said, I think the Warriors have a shot to win it all. Because they were like a 50-win team prior, right? But, I got laughed at. But they won 67 games. And they changed the game. And they won their first championship since 1970, what was it, 75? Yeah. So they changed the game. Now, he would win Coach of the Year in 2016, which the team would break the Chicago Bulls record, going 73-9. Unfortunately, they wouldn't win the championship. They lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers, blowing a 3-1 comeback. And I think we all know the story from there about his head coaching. He's been a stand-up guy. He has, right now, at the time of this video, 429 regular season games that he's won. He's won 80 playoff games as head coach. And I think, I could be wrong when I'm saying this, I think he's the first head coach in NBA history to lead his team to 67 or more wins in 3 consecutive seasons. I don't think there's another coach to do that. And I was happy to see him in the top 15 coaches of NBA history in 2022. And he's a great activist. That's what I've always liked about him. He's a stand-up guy. He stands behind his players. He's not afraid to tell the truth. I know a lot of people disagree with his politics. I don't mean to get political here. So there could be some people watching this disagreeing with me. That's fine. But let's talk about his accolades here. Altogether, he's a 9-time NBA champion, 5 as a player, 4 as a head coach, 2016 Coach of the Year, 2-time All-Star NBA game coach, 1997 three-point contest winner. He's a 2020 gold medalist winner as an assistant coach. Let's talk about his media awards. He's a 3-time ESPY award winner, 2015 Best Coach Manager, 2017 and 2022 Outstanding Team as Coach of the Warriors. And that is Steve Kerr's story. Let me know what your thoughts are down below, and thanks for watching.